Hello, this is AC Unit, and welcome to Mini-Logue. Today, I will be painting a Space Marine Lieutenant from the game Warhammer 40k. This Space Marine Lieutenant is equipped with a Neo-Volkite Pistol, a Storm Shield, an Iron Halo, and a Power Sword. The Neo-Volkite Pistol is a type of weapon called a Volkite weapon, and these Volkite weapons shoot concentrated microwaves at the enemy. They don't melt armor, they don't leave a big damage, a dent, or anything. What they do instead is they cook the target from the inside out. It's supposed to kind of get around armor and get around having to melt the armor to get to the actual body inside. And they're actually a ancient weapon, and they just recently in the lore are able to manufacture Volkite weapons, as this was a lost technology for a while. The Space Marine is also equipped with a Storm Shield that can protect them from gunfire, from melee weapons. It's a shield, essentially, in the broadest sense of the term. The Space Marine Lieutenant also is equipped with an Iron Halo. Now, Iron Halos are interesting in the lore as they are only awarded to Space Marines of high honor. It is very honorable to have an Iron Halo. It denotes status of being a veteran, or you have done something so great on the battlefield that your achievements must be remembered. The Iron Halo actually gives a Space Marine a force field, essentially, so it's even more protection beyond their armor. Now, the Power Sword is an interesting weapon. It is part of the power classification of weapons, and what power weapons do, including things like a Power Fist, Lightning Claws, what's called a Thunder Hammer, they actually charge electricity, and they charge it throughout the weapon. The Power Sword itself works like what's known as a vibroblade. A vibroblade in real life is a knife generally that is vibrating really fast in order to cut through things like if it was hot. And the power sword is able to charge electricity to cut through things at a molecular level. The Space Marine faction is a very interesting faction in Warhammer 40k. They are the faction in Warhammer 40k. If you see any Space Marines or anything about Warhammer 40,000, this army is the first thing you notice. This is the poster child, and this has to do with the ease of painting and the ease of collecting Space Marines. They are very obvious in what they do and what each unit does, and they also have the most lore written about them. A bit of lore about Space Marines is that they are genetically altered super soldiers. They are all male. However, you can headcanon them as whatever you like, but they are generally in lore all male. This is because in the lore, only men are able to handle the genetic augmentation and the addition of extra organs for it to become a Space Marine. Space Marines generally are taken as young adolescents, around 14 years of age, to start the genetic augmentation. They are a very hard to cultivate, as being selected to be a Space Marine does not guarantee you to become an actual full-fledged Space Marine. Or you can reject the organs, the surgeries can go wrong. You can actually reject the organs later down on the road to becoming an actual full-fledged Space Marine as they add more and more organs into you. And each Space Marine is pretty interesting. So Space Marines as a full faction fight for humanity, but there are actually little sub-factions in the Space Marines because of how wide and varied their different cultures are. In Space Marines, in the beginning, there were 9 legions of Space Marines, loyalist Space Marines that fight for humanity, and then there were 9 Space Marines that 9 Space Marine legions that defected to fight for, essentially, in other words, evil or chaos. I'm going to be focusing on the 9 that fight for humanity, And it's very interesting as each legion actually had different amounts of Space Marines in them at the time, but they had a lot of Space Marines. Now, there's a big civil war that happened because of this, which caused the nine Chaos Space Marines to split from the 9 normal Space Marines. And as such, there was a rule implemented by one of the leaders of the Space Marine legions called Robute Guilliman for the Ultramarines Space Marines. The rule is that each Space Marine legion will now, from forever onwards, be split into chapters of Space Marines. And those chapters can only have up to 1,000 Space Marines each. And as such, a bunch of Space Marine legions had to be broken up. The Ultramarines, specifically from Robute Guilliman, were the biggest and largest force of Space Marines in humanity. And so after that, every Space Marine chapter now holds 1,000 Space Marines, plus any miscellaneous servants, humans that help the ship to run, crew for the ships, and inside the Space Marine chapters, they have their own cultures. Most chapters are successor chapters that are broken off from the ideology of one Space Marine Legion, such as the Space Marine Legion of the White Scars, which are Mongolians. They have a bunch of successor chapters that follow like kind of Mongolian-esque traditions. The White Scars themselves are personally one of my favorite chapters, as I love their whole ideology of go fast, and don't stop going fast and kill people as you go fast. I also enjoy the Space Marine Legion, they're called founding chapters. These Space Marine Legions in the beginning, they are now called the founding chapters, as they are the most well-known and recognized chapters. So some of them include, like I said, the White Scars. They are my personal favorite. They include the Ultramarines, which if you see any Space Marine art or Space Marines when you buy models or look at the models, they generally are blue and gold. Those are Ultramarines, and that's because blue is a very easy color to work with, and so is gold, and so is black. Another founding chapter are the Salamanders. These are Marines that have green on them, generally green and black, and they are one of the few nice Space Marines that actually care about humanity. Most Space Marines do not. Most Space Marines will use whatever they have with them as a tool. Humanity is just a tool for them to fulfill their mission to protect humanity and the Emperor of mankind. Another Space Marine chapter that I like are the Raven Guard, which are the stealth ops. They are special operatives, essentially. They do all the espionage, they spy on people, they are covert, they are sneaky, and they actually are able to blend into shadows. And they're a very interesting chapter, but there's not much written on them. But going back to Space Marines as a whole, they are 1,000 Space Marines per chapter. And in those chapters, there are companies, and there are 10 companies in a chapter. Each company of Space Marine is generally 100 Space Marines. 100 times 10 is 1,000. In the chain of command of companies, generally the first company is the most veteran of the chapter. They are the ones with the most experience. They usually have this strong armor called Terminator armor that eventually I will paint on this channel. And then the 10th company are generally the new recruits or the Space Marines that are still going through the process of becoming full-fledged Space Marines. They are called the Scout Marines. And usually they're sent as like a sort of like scouts. They are the first to land to kind of scope out the area. But generally not all 10th company Space Marines are scouts generally. It's the least experienced or the ones that don't really have too much battle experience. It's the new guys. And that doesn't mean that the leadership in the 10th company is inexperienced, so to say. In each company of Space Marines, the leadership is the captain of the company, the lieutenant, and then it's squads of 10 in each. It's squads of 10 by 10, which means there are 10 squads in each company that hold about 10 Space Marines. Generally, that number can vary depending on what you do and what units you have and what the chapter might be all about. Some chapters are all about speed, some chapters are like all about heavy weapons, and that can change the number of Space Marines in a company. But generally, it's about 100 Space Marines to a company. Now, there are additional Space Marines that fall outside of these rules. They fall outside the captain, lieutenant, and the squads. They are the apothecaries. The apothecaries are generally the medical specialists. They are the medics in a military sense. And then there are the librarians. These are the guys who do the magic. They are what's known as psychers, who do all the magic. They do magic stuff. It's very, very blunt as to what they do. And psychers are very rare, and especially even rare among Space Marine chapters. Sometimes you don't even see psychers. You don't see librarians in Space Marine chapters. But beyond that, after you look up and up and up the company command, the chain of command in the company, we go to the very tip top of a chapter, and that would be the chapter master. Now, the chapter master is, as they say, the guy in the chapter. He is the utmost leader, and generally he has very specially crafted weapons. He is very well respected, very veteran, very good at his job. To be a chapter master is to lead 999 people who are, if stronger, as strong as you, if not maybe a bit stronger. I'm not too sure, but it's a very tough job. It's a very tough job as well to also see your comrades die in battle, and you have to be the one who kind of reconciles with that. But Space Marines are very interesting in that what I'm painting here is the lieutenant, who is the second in command to the captain in a company. And right now, I have a little anecdote I kind of had to do while I was painting this model. Unlike the previous model, the Usahana Space Marine, this model I didn't have a clear idea of the color scheme I was going to do. So I wanted to do something with purple and yellow, and I really liked how I split up the backpack in two halves for the Usahana Space Marine. So I wanted to do that, but with yellow and purple this time. But I was having a lot of trouble figuring out other colors for the shield, the sword sheath, the gun. I was just frustrated because I didn't know what I wanted. So while I was painting, right, I did not have a set color scheme. I had the base, which was purple and yellow for the body, but I didn't know what I wanted to do for the rest. So while I was painting this model, I was consulting with a friend, and we were working together, kind of trying to figure out what colors might fit. I was asking them, hey, would this fit, or do you think this is too much, too little, saturated, not too saturated, contrasty, blending in. It's very hard to kind of come up with the color scheme on the fly. It's a lot nicer to have a color scheme already prepared and just going, yes, I want this. But I really enjoyed how this turned out, and as you see, I'm kind of going through the motions, just going through painting it like normal. What I have here for colors is, for the yellow half, I have the Averland Sunset paint from Citadel. This episode, actually, I will not be posting up the pictures of the paints. I'll actually put that in the description instead, as it kind of takes a lot of time to find the right image, put it in, and I kind of want this series to be a bit more just talking about things that interest me, or I want to talk about more so than it is about the paint itself. I also want to show in this series that you can, in fact, not be satisfied with what you originally had and just keep moving on and keep moving on, and eventually it comes together. So I chose, for the yellow, I chose the Averland Sunset color from Citadel. This color is a pretty good yellow. It's thick. It covers well. A lot of yellows generally do not. For the purple, I used the classic Pro-Acryl Plum. Very good color, very nice, and it really contrasts with the yellow very well. It's got this like flat look, and the yellow is a bit more strong. Now for the shoulder pad, I've chosen to use Castellan Green from Citadel. This was one of the first paints I actually bought, and it stuck around with me ever since I first started painting models. Honestly, I'm very glad that I had it because it has the shade of green that I really enjoy. It's like a pine forest green or a swampy green. Very nice. I did use gold, Vallejo polished gold on some trim and that one knee on the yellow leg. That knee I used a color Akhelian green contrast paint from Citadel in order to make it green. And I'm just swiveling around by the looks of it. For the cloth, the little cloth in the front, that's called a tabard, Tabbard. I used, I believe it was Krieg khaki or Krieg camo. I'm not too sure on the name. It will be in the description, as I said, but I used that for the cloth. I want it to be kind of parchment-like. I used a brown for the sheath, and I used, I think, polished gold for the gold parts of the sheath and the sword handle and the sword pommel, which is the rounded bottom part of a sword handle. And I used that because I didn't really have a good contrast color to the yellow, and I didn't want to use silver again because it didn't look right to me in my head. So I chose to use gold, Vallejo's polished gold. And yeah, on the camera right now is really hard to see because I am not too sure where my camera is. It's really difficult for me sometimes to determine where my camera is. Here I am trying to figure it out, and I got it, but it flies out. So in this instance, I tried to dry brush Krieg khaki onto the brown of the scabbard. It didn't work because I had too much paint on my brush and my brush was too wet. What ended up happening was it kept kind of splotched it around, like I tossed a bunch of sand and dust onto the scabbard. I think honestly, after looking at it, it's not too bad, but I would be more careful on the dry brushing. For the Neo-Volkite Pistol, I used orange on the little coils on top, kind of like the plasma coils looking things. That's because Neo-Volkite is generally orange depicted in most Warhammer art. The idea is it's just concentrated microwave beams. And I really didn't have too much of an idea as to what I wanted to do for the backpack. So I just did purple, the plum purple, I believe, and then I just put the Iron Halo as. Actually, the Iron Halo was interesting because I used a brown contrast paint, Cygor brown, and that paint is a pretty nice brown to put over gold. I'll use it on the shield, and I believe you can see that I did use it on the shield. And yeah, I used it on the Iron Halo, and then I dry brushed a bit of gold on the Iron Halo, get it a bit more glistening, right? Get a bit more color contrast. And here I am using Mephiston Red paint on the model. So that the idea to use Mephiston Red is for the little wax seals on the Space Marine. They are called purity seals. And these purity seals are generally awarded after achievements on battle or to write prayers to the Emperor of mankind. Honestly, this model was very, very interesting to me because of how indecisive I was throughout the entire process. I didn't know where I was going with any of the colors. I was not too confident with my color choice, but in the end, it looks pretty good put together. I probably would not I would probably try not to do this too often because it really is hard to look through my collection of paints, try and figure out what I can do on the fly. And you know, I like having a very set color scheme that I want to do. It really just lets me focus on the paint. It gives me in the Zen mode, and I believe that that's something uh, that's pretty beneficial to get into when you're painting, is to get into a flow state. That's to help with just getting through the process. You know, you're feeling the paints, you're getting it down, you're getting the paint on the model, and yeah, you're just putting it all together. So most models are actually not pins and pegs like how this model is. They're not easily disassemblable and put together. You usually have to use something called plastic glue, which actually welds pieces of plastic together. And yeah, it's I had the benefit of this being very easier to build, which let me kind of pick apart the little independent objects and paint them individually. But yeah, then again, I'm also using silver as a neutral color. I really recommend having a silver paint as a very good neutral color. It's always very useful. And yeah, I used Army Painter Dark Tone on everywhere, give it a bit more definition, kind of get into the shadows, make it more defined and not too flat. And here we go. And it looks like I am finishing up the model. Very nice. And honestly, I think that what I did for this model was pretty good. And I want to just say that if you ever are stuck on a color scheme or you want to double back away from the color scheme you originally chose, that's completely fine. Nothing is set in stone until you yourself say it is. I believe that's a good lesson for a lot of things in life. In this case, the model is completed, and I would like to say thank you for watching, and I invite you to for the next episode of Mini-Logue.